Alright, let's be honest. When you hear the name Nigel Farage, you don't immediately think complex psychological specimen worthy of Freud-level analysis. No, you probably think of beer, Brexit, and somebody who always looks like he's just spotted a pub across the street. But today, we are going to dig into him. His contradictions, his political gymnastics, and his surprisingly theatrical personality shifts. And yes, there will be a lot of contradictions. Because if Farage had a motto, it would probably be, well, actually, I've changed my mind. So welcome to this very professional, very accurate, definitely university-certified psychological evaluation. Spoiler, I don't actually have the qualifications, but I do have the sarcasm, which is honestly more useful here. I do have an opinion though. Stick around, I'll tell you at the end of the analysis. Now let's jump in. Nigel Farage was born on the 3rd of April 1964 in Kent, England, which already sets the tone. The Garden of England, leafy villages, cricket pitches, and the kind of environment where people say things like back in my day before they've even hit puberty. He attended Dulwich College, a posh school, where he reportedly developed his love for performance. And performance is really the word here, because Farage is not a man who simply exists. He performs, he campaigns, he narrates his own story in real time. He is, in many ways, a pub landlord pretending to be Churchill. And here's the interesting bit. As a teenager, he was apparently outspoken to the point of being almost theatrical. Teachers noticed. People remember him as someone who wanted attention, who liked provocation, and who enjoyed taking contrarian positions. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In psychology, we call it extroversion combined with a touch of oppositional defiant traits. In normal English, the kid who always had to say the opposite of what you just said, purely for the thrill of being annoying. But before we continue, let me know in the comments what other famous people need to be professionally misdiagnosed. I'm building a whole library of case studies that no respectable academic institution would approve of. And if you're enjoying these semi-professional, highly questionable psychological evaluations, do subscribe. I promise more dubious insights into the world's most confusing personalities. Now fast forward. Nigel Farage becomes famous as one of the architects of Brexit, the leader of UKIP, the man with the pint in one hand and the Union Jack in the other. But here's the twist. His political life is built on a kind of restless improvisation. Take deportations, for example. For years, Farage's focus was mainly on border control and immigration caps. But more recently, especially as public protests and unrest over asylum accommodation hit the headlines, his rhetoric sharpened. Suddenly the language shifted toward mass deportations and ripping up rules that make deportations difficult. The timing makes it hard not to notice how quickly he adjusts when the crowd is agitated. That is classic populism. In psychological terms, we're looking at a high sensitivity to external validation. He scans the room, sees what gets applause, and then adopts that position like he's trying on a jacket in Marks & Spencer. If it fits, he wears it. If it doesn't, back on the hanger it goes. The irony, of course, is that people often mistake this for leadership. In reality, it's more like karaoke leadership. Somebody else picks the song, and Nigel just belts it out with a pint of bitter in hand. But let's give him credit. Farage has charisma. That's undeniable. He has the kind of voice that sounds like it's permanently complaining about the price of a train ticket, and people love it. He connects with audiences because he sounds like your uncle after 3 pints at a barbecue. Charisma, though, can be deceptive. In personality psychology, we talk about the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Now, I'm not saying Farage ticks all 3 boxes, but he definitely flirts with narcissistic tendencies. Not necessarily the I am the centre of the universe kind, but the subtler, attention-hungry variant. He thrives on being noticed. Silence terrifies him. You may ask, is that necessarily a bad thing? Well, not always. It makes him a great communicator, a compelling speaker, and a political survivor. But it also means consistency is sacrificed at the altar of applause. Remember when he said Britain should be independent, free, standing tall? And then, almost immediately after Brexit, he resigned from UKIP leadership. He didn't disappear completely, of course. He stayed in the media spotlight, launched the Brexit Party, later rebranded it as Reform UK, and then claimed he was stepping back from frontline politics in 2021. But like a pub regular who insists he's leaving after just one more pint, he eventually returned to the stage in 2024, running for Parliament and winning a seat in Clacton. That's the Farage paradox. He likes the heroic exit almost as much as the dramatic comeback. So let's talk about contradictions. This is where his personality really shines. One day he's declaring himself the champion of the working class. The next he's sipping champagne in Brussels. He rants about elites while simultaneously loving the attention of being treated like one. He's against career politicians but somehow made an entire career out of being, you guessed it, a politician. This is not just inconsistency. It's adaptive contradiction. Psychologists might call it impression management. He tailors his message depending on the audience in front of him. Pub crowd, he's the bloke who hates Brussels bureaucrats. Business leaders? Suddenly he's pragmatic, polished, and ready to talk trade. Television cameras? Oh, now he's the rebel outsider. And let's be clear, this flexibility has worked for him. It kept him relevant long after many thought he'd fade into obscurity. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When somebody contradicts themselves this often, it becomes impossible to know what they actually believe. It's like trying to nail jelly to a wall. You might be wondering, where does this come from? Was he always like this? Or did success turn him into the human equivalent of a weather vane? I think some of it goes back to early personality traits. From accounts of his youth, Farage was always contrarian. He liked the spotlight. He was willing to take bold stances, partly because it got him noticed. Add to that the intoxicating taste of political relevance, and you get a feedback loop. Provocation leads to attention, which leads to influence, which leads to more provocation. Rinse, repeat, pint, cigarette. The media plays a role too. Farage is made for television. He knows how to provoke just enough outrage to stay in the headlines without completely disqualifying himself. It's a balancing act, like juggling knives, except every now and then he drops one and pretends it was on purpose. Now, let's dig into his demeanour. Nigel always looks faintly amused, like he's watching a pigeon steal someone's chips. That expression is a psychological tactic. It signals confidence, control, and a bit of cheekiness. People mistake it for authenticity, because who could possibly fake being that smug all the time? Spoiler? He can. And then there's his love of pub culture. The beer, the cigarettes, the casual, man-of-the-people image. It's deliberate branding. He wants you to think he's approachable, the kind of politician you could actually have a pint with. And to be fair, you probably could. But here's the trick. The pint is a prop. It's not about drinking. It's about being seen drinking. A stage performance in a pub rather than a private habit. Let's talk about one of his most famous contradictions, immigration. He has shifted on this topic more than a rusty garden gate. For years he leaned heavily on border control and immigration limits, but not always on mass deportations. Then, when protests and public pressure grew, he turned up the volume on deportation rhetoric. Not because he had discovered some brand new principle, but because he had discovered a brand new audience. This reactive style is psychologically fascinating. It shows high social attunement, the ability to read the crowd and adjust accordingly. In another context, this could make him an excellent entertainer, a stand-up comedian perhaps. But in politics, it makes him unpredictable. You never know which Farage you'll get tomorrow. And here's the weirder part. He thrives on chaos. He likes the heat of controversy. For most people, protests and criticism are stressful. For Farage, it's oxygen. It keeps him alive in the public imagination. That, in itself, is almost addictive behaviour. Not substance addiction, but attention addiction. The dopamine hit of being talked about. But let's pause for a second. Despite all of this, there are qualities to admire. Farage is resilient. He's been written off more times than I can count. Yet he keeps bouncing back, grinning like a man who just bet £5 on the wrong horse and still got a free drink out of it. That resilience, psychologically speaking, comes from high self-efficacy. He believes he can make a difference even when everything suggests otherwise, and he's effective at communication. Simple, clear, memorable lines. He doesn't bury his points in jargon. In fact, he avoids complexity like it's Brussels sprouts at Christmas dinner. That's a strength. It explains why he connected with millions who felt alienated by mainstream politicians. But, and you knew this was coming, clarity without consistency can be dangerous. It's easy to sound confident when you're not worried about tomorrow's contradictions. So what's the personality profile here? Nigel is extroverted, attention-driven, highly adaptive, often contradictory, with narcissistic tendencies and a populist instinct. He thrives on conflict, embraces performance, and avoids accountability when the spotlight gets too hot. He's a political showman, less of a statesman, and more of a reality TV character who somehow wandered onto the floor of Parliament. In another life, he might have been a travelling salesman, the kind who convinces you to buy a miracle cleaning spray that stops working the moment he leaves your house. But in this life, he's the man who convinced Britain to leave the European Union, resigned when the job got messy, and then strutted back years later for another round. So what do we take from all this? Farage is both predictable and unpredictable. Predictable in that he will always chase attention, unpredictable in that his positions will shift according to whatever brings the loudest applause. If you want to know what Nigel Farage believes, don't ask him. Ask the crowd in front of him, then wait 5 minutes. I know many people are considering voting for him now because of his recent comments about deportations. But can you really trust that he won't change his mind again? I certainly wouldn't. If you want my honest opinion, Advance UK is gaining a lot of traction and has been consistent on immigration policies. They would get my vote, if anything, because Tommy Robinson has endorsed them, and I love the guy. And that, my friends, is the Nigel Farage personality profile, a man who thrives in contradiction, survives on charisma, and leaves us all slightly confused but weirdly entertained. Until next time, keep your pint steady, your contradictions consistent, and remember, if Farage can reinvent himself every 5 minutes, maybe we can too. Goodbye.